Rebecca Walsh worried the hem of her emerald silk dress between her fingers, acutely aware it had cost more than she should have spent. Even if she'd convinced herself it was an investment for her cousin's upscale wedding. Exiled at table 19, practically in a different time zone from the head table, she sipped champagne and wrestled with the now familiar ache of being the lone single mother in any room. Across the glittering ballroom of the Grand Harbor Hotel, her 5-year-old daughter, Penny, spun with the other flower girls in a burst of tulle and ribbons, watched over by Rebecca's aunt. At least one of them was having fun. "You look like you're mapping an escape route," a deep voice said behind her. "I've been eyeing the kitchen door myself." Rebecca turned too fast, nearly sloshing champagne over the rim of her glass, and found herself staring up at Jackson Hayes, her ultimate boss at Meridian Publishing, where she'd spent the last 3 years as a mid-level editor. 6'3", eyes the color of good bourbon, and a jaw that looked stolen from a cologne ad. He was the very last person she expected at Melissa's wedding. "Mr. Hayes," she stammered, suddenly hyper-aware of her slightly smudged lipstick and the tiny rip in her dress she'd haphazardly stitched that morning. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, and the transformation of his usually composed face made something low in her stomach tighten. "Jackson," he corrected. "We're off the clock. Thomas and I were roommates at Dartmouth." He nodded toward the groom. "I'm surprised our paths haven't crossed at one of their parties before." Heat rose in her cheeks. Her cousin's new husband had always floated in social circles far removed from her modest Brooklyn reality. That Jackson Hayes, publishing wunderkind, 35-year-old CEO, rumored billionaire, belonged in that orbit shouldn't have startled her. "May I?" he asked, indicating the empty chair beside her at the otherwise deserted table. She nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of everything. Her posture, the wrinkles in the tablecloth, the distance between them. In 3 years at Meridian, Jackson had barely said 10 sentences to her. Their contact had been confined to crowded elevators and company-wide meetings where he sat encircled by senior executives, polite but remote. "You're Rebecca Walsh, right? Acquisitions and development," he said as he sat with effortless grace. His perfectly tailored tuxedo made every other suit in the room look borrowed. "You know who I am?" She couldn't hide the surprise. His smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek she'd never noticed from 2 floors down. "I make it my business to know the people behind our most promising titles. The Montana Sky series you acquired last year is outperforming projections by 28%. Rebecca blinked. For months she'd battled to get that small-town romance series greenlit, championing an unknown author she believed in. To hear Jackson not only knew about it but tracked its numbers sent a sharp pulse of pride through her. "Thank you. I really believed in those books." She took another sip of champagne to steady herself. "But that still doesn't explain why you're hiding at the sad singles table instead of up front with Thomas and the A-list." Something flickered across his face, an unguarded flash that vanished almost as soon as she noticed it. "Maybe I'm tired of people who only see the CEO and not the person," he said lightly. Before she could respond, raised voices erupted near the dance floor. Rebecca's gaze snapped to Penny, who stood frozen in the middle of the room, her flower girl dress splattered with what looked like red wine. Tears shone in her big blue eyes while a flustered waiter apologized over and over. "Excuse me." Rebecca was already half out of her chair when Jackson's hand brushed her forearm. "Let me," he said, already rising, pulling a monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket. "I have nieces. I'm good in a crisis." Before she could protest, he was striding toward Penny. Rebecca watched, stunned, as Meridian's notoriously formidable CEO knelt to her daughter's height, produced a quarter from behind her ear in an old-fashioned magic trick that made Penny's eyes widen, then handed over the handkerchief with a conspiratorial wink. Within seconds, the tears turned into hiccuping giggles as he gently dabbed the stain. By the time they returned, Penny was cheerfully informing Rebecca that Mr. Jackson had declared the spill secret invisible ink. Only brave flower girls could see. "Mom, can I go back to Aunt Claire? We're having a dance contest," Penny asked, already wriggling away. "Of course. Just be careful with your dress." As Penny skipped off, Rebecca turned back to Jackson, who resumed his seat as though it were perfectly normal to rescue distraught children between champagne toasts. "Thank you. You're unexpectedly good with kids," she said. My sister has 7-year-old twins, he replied with an easy shrug. They're perpetually sticky and endlessly fascinated by everything that can stain furniture. His gaze lingered where Penny had disappeared into the crowd, warm and unguarded. She's wonderful. Your daughter. She has your smile. Something in Rebecca softened. Thank you. She's the best thing in my life. Her father. Jackson's question was casual, but his eyes were careful. Is he? Not in the picture. Rebecca's tone shut the door firmly. 3 years and counting. Jackson nodded once, accepting the boundary. Silence settled between them until he glanced toward the dance floor, where couples swayed beneath crystal chandeliers and cascades of white roses. Would you like to dance? He asked just as Melissa appeared at the table, a little breathless in her wedding gown. Becky, there you are. Her gaze ping-ponged between Rebecca and Jackson, curiosity blooming. I didn't realize you two knew each other. We work together, Rebecca said quickly. Rebecca is one of our most talented editors, Jackson added smoothly, rising to kiss the bride's cheek. Your cousin has an exceptional eye for what readers want. Melissa's immaculate brows shot up as she directed a look of impressed surprise at Rebecca. You should have said something. We've got you stuck back here when you ought to be up front with us. She turned to Jackson. And you, sir, are supposed to give a toast in 20 minutes. Thomas is hunting for you. Jackson grimaced. Duty calls. As Melissa drifted away, Rebecca felt a surprising pang. Save me a dance? He asked, voice pitched low, meant only for her. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced down at the screen and felt her stomach drop. What is it? Jackson's tone cut through the noise. My babysitter, she said, pulse rocketing. She's canceling. Family emergency. Panic surged. I either find someone else now or drive Penny home, but it's an hour back to the city and she's having such a good time. Jackson hesitated, then leaned closer. I have a suite here for after the reception. You and Penny can use it tonight if you need somewhere to stay. Rebecca stared at him, searching his expression for hidden motives and finding only concern. That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly impose. I'm actually staying with Thomas and some friends at his family place tonight. He cut in gently. The suite will go unused otherwise. As she wavered, a photographer materialized. Let's get a shot of the happy couple, he called cheerfully, clearly mistaking them for partners. Before Rebecca could correct him, Jackson's fingers slipped around hers under the table. He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear as he murmured words that would alter the course of her life. Pretend I'm your husband tonight. Just for the wedding, he whispered. It'll spare you the explanations. I've seen how your cousin's friends look at you. The pity when they think you're not watching. Rebecca went still, heart pounding. Rationality screamed that this was her boss, that this was messy and inappropriate and dangerous. But another part of her, the part worn thin by 3 years of solo dinners, of sidelong sympathy at school events, of trying to be both mother and father, whispered, just once, wouldn't it be nice? All right, she heard herself say, before she could think better of it. Just for tonight. Jackson's answering smile held both triumph and something like promise. He slid his arm around her waist and drew her in for the photograph. Trust me, he murmured. By morning, no one will be pitying Rebecca Walsh. Neither of them could have guessed how one night of make-believe would pull loose secrets they'd each buried for years, truths that would either shatter them or bind them together forever. Block 2. Character development and conflict. The evening shifted with startling speed. Within an hour of Jackson's quiet proposal, Rebecca found herself playing the role of his wife with an ease that unnerved her. What had begun as armor against pity became more complicated with every introduction, every shared look. Jackson inhabited the part effortlessly. His hand rested at the small of her back as he guided her through clusters of New York's elite, introducing her as the brilliant editor who keeps Meridian's bestseller list full. Each time he said it, a warm, dangerous pride unfurled in her. You're infuriatingly good at this, she murmured as they danced, maintaining a proper distance even though his hand burned against her waist. At waltzing. His eyes crinkled with amusement. At pretending. He spun her gently, drawing her half an inch closer. Who says I'm pretending? The question hung between them. Heavy with meaning she refused to examine. She pivoted the conversation. Your toast was beautiful, she said. I didn't realize you and Thomas were that close. A shadow brushed his features. We were once. Time and success have a way of stretching even old friendships thin. What happened? Success happened, he said quietly. People start expecting things. Or assuming you've changed when you haven't. His voice dropped. That's why this is different. You don't treat me like I'm a walking bank account. Rebecca laughed softly. Probably because I once watched you dump coffee all over yourself when the elevator jolted last Christmas. He stared, then burst out laughing. You remember that? Hard to forget the CEO of Meridian cursing like a sailor in a reindeer tie. His smile softened into something unguarded. See? Exactly my point. The dance ended. Rebecca spotted Penny at the dessert table, stifling an enormous yawn. I should get her to bed. It's way past bedtime, she said. Jackson nodded and, with a discreet movement, slid a key card into her hand.
Suite 1217.
Take your time. I'll make excuses if anyone asks. Thank you, she said, the words inadequate for everything he'd done for her and Penny that night. Half an hour later, with Penny already asleep in one of the suite's 2 bedrooms, Rebecca stood in the opulent living area trying not to gape. The place was bigger than her entire Brooklyn apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the sparkling Manhattan skyline. She kicked off her heels and crossed to the glass, pressing her palm against the cool surface, trying to process how a lonely table at a wedding had turned into this. A knock made her jump. She opened the door to find Jackson in the hallway, bow tie undone and hanging loose, looking more human and somehow more dangerous without his corporate armor. Sorry to interrupt, he said, remaining in the doorway. I forgot my overnight bag. Oh, of course. She stepped back, suddenly self-conscious of her bare feet and rumpled dress. He retrieved a leather duffel from the closet, then paused, bag in hand, as if unwilling to leave. How's Penny? Out cold. She thinks this is a princess castle, Rebecca said, managing a small smile. His answering smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The easy camaraderie from the dance floor had faded, replaced by something more guarded. Jackson, why are you really doing this? She asked. The pretending. The sweet. It's generous, but... She trailed off. What's in it for you? He set the bag down and looked at her steadily. Would you believe me if I said I was just being kind? In my experience, powerful men aren't kind without a reason, she said quietly. Something hardened in his gaze. That says more about the men you've known than it does about me. She folded her arms. You can't blame me for being cautious. You're my boss. This whole situation is complicated. His jaw flexed. Is that why you've turned down every promotion I've authorized for you in the last 2 years? Rebecca stared. What? 3 times, Jackson said, raking a hand through his hair, leaving it mussed. 3 times I've signed off on a move to senior editor with a significant raise. 3 times you declined before HR could even schedule a conversation. She felt the floor tilt. That's not possible. I've never received a single promotion offer at Meridian. Not once. Silence thickened as they realized the same name at the same moment. Daniel Morgan, they said together. Daniel, editorial director. Her direct superior. Jackson's old friend. The man who'd made his disdain for her clear from day one. Who'd quietly taken credit for her finds. Who'd moved her authors without warning. He told me you weren't interested in advancement, Jackson said slowly. That you preferred your current role for the flexibility. Because of Penny. A cold, sharp anger bloomed in Rebecca's chest. And you believed him. Without ever speaking to me. He's been at Meridian longer than I have. 20 years. Jackson's expression darkened. But that ends Monday. One way or another. You're going to fire him? Her voice came out faint. I've suspected for a while that he's been manipulating things. But this. Jackson's tone went flat. This crosses a line. Rebecca sank onto the sofa, overwhelmed. This explains so much. The way he's undermined me, reassigning my projects. She looked up, fury piercing through the confusion. Did you know he transferred the Montana Sky author to Brett in romance last week? After I nurtured that relationship for over a year. Jackson's eyes flashed. Is that why you called in sick Friday? First sick day in 3 years. Heat crept into her face. I needed time. That series meant a lot to me. He sat beside her, leaving a respectful gap. I had no idea any of this was happening. But it stops now. He hesitated, then added quietly, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have paid closer attention. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the distant executive from boardrooms or the smooth pretend husband from the reception. This was a man taking responsibility. Why do you care so much? She asked before she could stop herself. I'm just one editor. Because I started as an editor, he said, turning to the window where the city glowed below them. Before the MBA, before the corner office. I remember what it's like to love stories so much you'll fight anyone to see them in print. He faced her again, gaze steady. And because I've been watching your work, Rebecca. The writers you find, the manuscripts you fight for, they're special. You're special. Her throat tightened around a reply. A small voice came from the bedroom doorway. Mommy, I had a bad dream. Penny stood there in her princess pajamas, clinging to the well-loved stuffed rabbit she'd had since birth. Her eyes widened when she spotted Jackson. Mr. Magic Man. Did you come to our sleepover too? Rebecca's shoulders tensed, but Jackson simply knelt. No, sweetheart, he said gently. I just came to make sure your castle is comfy enough. I heard about a bad dream. There was a dragon under the bed, she whispered. He nodded gravely. That is serious. Then in the same serious tone, lucky for us, dragons are terrified of brave flower girls. Especially ones who know magic. I don't know magic. Sure you do. He produced the same quarter as before. Remember this? As he patiently showed her the trick again, guiding her small hands through the motions, Rebecca watched in silence. Penny, usually wary of strange men, was trying, giggling, failing, trying again. And Jackson, powerful, intimidating Jackson, met every clumsy attempt with patience instead of patronizing cheer. When Penny finally managed a clumsy approximation, her face lit up. Now the dragon will be scared of me. Absolutely petrified, Jackson confirmed. Need me to check under the bed to be sure? After a full dragon inspection and 3 more demonstrations of her newfound magic, Penny allowed Rebecca to tuck her back in. When Rebecca returned, Jackson stood at the window again, hands in his pockets, face turned to the city. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't have to do all that. I wanted to, he said simply. She's remarkable. She is. A beat of silence, then Rebecca added. Her father has never met her. He left before I even knew I was pregnant. His expression didn't change, but something iced over in his eyes. His loss. I used to think so. She sank onto the sofa. Now I'm pretty sure it's true. Michael wasn't. She searched for the word. He wasn't cruel. Just selfish. Manipulative. Convinced he was one record deal away from greatness while I paid every bill. She let out a short, humorless laugh. The irony? He did get that deal. 6 months after he walked out. I saw his face on a Times Square billboard last year. Understanding sharpened Jackson's features. Your ex is Michael Delaney? You know his music? She asked, startled. My niece is obsessed with his last album, he said dryly. No wonder you're wary of ambitious men. The truth stung more than she cared to admit. She shifted topics. It's late. You should go before people start talking. Let them, he said lightly. Then his tone softened. Unless you want me to go. The air between them thickened. For a reckless second, Rebecca imagined saying stay. Not as her CEO. Not as her pretend husband. Just as the man who'd stepped in tonight over and over without being asked. Instead she stood, putting distance between them. This has been unexpected. But Monday morning we go back to who we are at work. He rose, picked up his bag. At the door he paused. You never did answer my question, he said. About whether I was pretending. Before she could speak, he was gone, leaving her alone with the question that would steal her sleep, and with the growing suspicion that this charade had awakened feelings neither of them had planned on. What she couldn't know was that Jackson Hayes carried his own buried secrets, and they would soon threaten everything that had begun between them. Monday came with the blinding clarity of office fluorescent lights. Rebecca stepped into Meridian Publishing's marble lobby with Penny's sticky goodbye kiss still on her cheek, her mind looping through the weekend like a film she couldn't pause. She'd spent Sunday dissecting everything Jackson had said and done, then ruthlessly reminding herself it had all been temporary, a performance already over. The elevator door slid open to reveal Daniel Morgan, his perpetual smirk tightening at the sight of her. "Recovered from your illness, I see," he drawled as she stepped in. "Good morning, Daniel." "Yes, thank you for your concern." Her tone stayed cool. He snorted. "I'll need the Mitchell manuscript on my desk by noon. Marketing has questions." Mitchell, another author she'd discovered, another project Daniel had appropriated. "Of course," she said evenly. "The author did request my input on the new chapters. I'll be sure to forward my notes." His smile thinned. "I'm sure you will." The elevator chimed for the editorial floor. As she stepped out, he added, "Oh, and quarterly reviews have been moved up. Hayes wants all department heads in the conference room at 10. Something in his tone pricked her ears. "Just department heads? Don't worry your pretty little head about executive matters, Rebecca," he said, right as the doors slid shut on his condescension. Anger burned hot and clean in her chest. For years she'd let Daniel's behavior slide. Afraid to risk her job, too buried in work and parenting to fight politics without proof. Now she finally had it. At 9:57, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Conference room. 10 a.m. Don't be late." Her pulse kicked. Jackson had her personal number, and he was specifically summoning her to a meeting Daniel had just labeled for department heads. At 10:01, she slipped into the glass-walled conference room. Senior leadership already filled the seats. Daniel's face registered shock, then barely veiled fury when he saw her. Jackson sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit, every inch the cool executive. Whatever warmth she'd glimpsed over the weekend was carefully locked away. "Ms. Walsh," he said, voice professional. "Thank you for joining us. Please have a seat." The only empty chair was directly across from Daniel. She took it, aware of his stare. "Before we begin," Jackson said, scanning the room, "I have an organizational announcement. Effective immediately, Daniel Morgan will be transitioning out of his role as editorial director." The silence was electric. Daniel's face went chalky. "In the interim," Jackson continued calmly, "Rebecca Walsh will be assuming his responsibilities while we evaluate options for permanent restructuring." Rebecca went utterly still. Across from her, Daniel lurched halfway out of his chair. "This is outrageous." "On what grounds?" he demanded. "On the grounds that you deliberately sabotaged company operations," Jackson replied, voice glacial. "You withheld promotion opportunities, misrepresented staff preferences, and falsified communications to senior management." He nodded to his assistant, who placed a slim folder at Daniel's elbow. "HR will go over the documentation with you after this meeting." Whispers flared around the table. Rebecca sat frozen, Daniel's hatred practically vibrating across the polished wood. Jackson moved on to quarterly projections and marketing strategies, as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb under Meridian's editorial hierarchy. Rebecca barely heard a word. When the meeting ended, he asked her to stay behind. Daniel lingered in the doorway, eyes full of quiet threat. "You'll regret this, Hayes," he said softly. "Both of you." The door shut. Silence. "What just happened?" Rebecca asked, turning to Jackson. He loosened his tie a fraction. It was the only sign anything had rattled him. "Justice, I hope. Though I admit I may have blindsided you." "May have?" she echoed. "You just put a massive target on my back. Daniel has influential friends across the industry. So do I." His expression gentled. "Rebecca, you earned that promotion 3 times over. The fact you achieved what you did under Daniel makes you more than qualified. That's not the issue." A headache pulsed behind her eyes. "This looks like favoritism. People will assume that you're sleeping your way up," he finished quietly. She flinched. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." His jaw tightened. "Is that what you think this is?" "No," she said immediately, then sighed. "But it's what everyone else is going to think. Which is why this feels—" "I anticipated that," he said, sliding a different folder toward her. Which is why HR already conducted a review of Daniel's communications. That, he nodded at the papers, is a documented record of him blocking your promotions. She flipped through the pages. Emails, date-stamped notes, internal memos. The pattern was undeniable. How did you get all this so fast? She whispered. I've had concerns about Daniel for months, he said. Your situation pushed me to act. This promotion is strictly merit-based. Anyone implying otherwise will have a conversation with legal. He met her gaze. This has nothing to do with the wedding. You have my word. Something in his expression, earnest, steady, made her want to believe him. Thank you, she said quietly. But I still have a practical problem. I'm a single mother. The editorial director role means late nights, weekends, travel. All negotiable, he said. Frankly, Meridian needs to modernize how we treat working parents. You can help set that precedent. Before she could reply, his assistant knocked and slipped in. Mr. Hayes, your 11 o'clock is here. Walsh, HR would like to meet to go over transition details. Rebecca stood, gathering the folder. At the door she paused. For what it's worth, she said. Thank you for believing in me. His answering smile was brief but real. Prove me right. That's all the thanks I need. The next few weeks blurred. Rebecca threw herself into her new role, juggling contracts, strategy meetings, and school pickups. True to his word, Jackson arranged flexibility around Penny's schedule, though the workload still left Rebecca collapsing into bed most nights. At the office, Jackson kept a scrupulous distance. Their interactions were confined to professional meetings, his tone all business. 3 weeks after her promotion, she was still at her desk late, wading through contracts for a major acquisition, when a knock came at her office door. Jackson leaned in the frame, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. Still here? He asked. Where's Penny? Sleep over with her cousin. Rebecca set her pen down, suddenly aware they were alone on the nearly deserted executive floor. I'm taking advantage of the rare child-free night to catch up. He nodded as if he knew exactly what that felt like. Have you eaten? She thought about it. I had a granola bar around 6. That doesn't count. He straightened. There's a Thai place around the corner that stays open late. Come on. Jackson, I'm not sure that's a good idea, she said, though her stomach rumbled. It's dinner, Rebecca. Between colleagues. His face gave nothing away. Against her better judgment, she agreed. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet booth at the back of a tiny restaurant, the air fragrant with lemongrass and curry. Away from Meridian's glass walls, something in her eased. You've done extraordinary work these past weeks, Jackson said as they finished their food. The Morrison deal alone would have justified your promotion. It feels good, she admitted, to finally have the authority to trust my instincts. Speaking of authority. He set his fork down, his expression sobering. There's something you should know. Daniel's been meeting with Paragon Press executives. Her stomach clenched. Paragon was Meridian's biggest rival. You think he's feeding them information? She asked. I know he is, Jackson said. Specifically, he's targeting your authors. Trying to poach them. He can't, his non-compete is being flagrantly ignored, Jackson said. Proving it is the problem. Rebecca pushed her plate away, appetite gone. The Montana Sky author called me yesterday. She said she'd received a better offer but wouldn't say from whom. That tracks, he said grimly. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing the back of her hand before he pulled away. I'm sorry to drag you into this, but you needed to know what we're facing. Her skin tingled where he'd touched her. She forced her mind back to business. What do we do? She asked. We fight, Jackson said simply. Starting with the author retreat this weekend in the Catskills. That's in 3 days, she said. I can't just Penny. Bring her, he said. The resort has excellent childcare. This retreat is critical for our relationships with key authors. If Daniel's circling them, we need you there. Jackson, I can't just. Rebecca. His voice gentled. I'm not asking as your CEO. I'm asking as someone who knows how good you are at this. We need you. The way he said we sent a confusing ripple through her. 3 days in the mountains with Jackson with Penny in tow, surrounded by industry eyes. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. "I'll have to rearrange some things," she said at last. His smile made the looming logistics almost worth it. Friday afternoon, Rebecca and Penny arrived at Lakeview Lodge, perched among autumn-tinted hills. The retreat's reception was already in full swing, leaving Rebecca to check them in alone. "I'm not finding a reservation under Walsh," the receptionist said, frowning at her computer. "Meridian Publishing has several rooms blocked, but none in your name." "That can't be right." Rebecca's frustration spiked. "I'm the editorial director. I should be listed with the other senior staff." The woman checked, then checked again. "All the Meridian rooms have been assigned. I'm afraid we're fully booked with the retreat and a wedding. There's nothing left." "Mom, I'm hungry," Penny whispered, tugging on her blazer. "You promised dinner." Rebecca exhaled slowly, a headache forming. It had been a scramble of a day and a 3-hour drive with a restless 5-year-old. This was the last complication she needed. "Is there anything within driving distance?" she asked. "Another hotel?" "Not within 30 miles, the receptionist said apologetically. "Leaf season is busy." "What seems to be the issue?" Jackson's voice cut in from behind. Rebecca turned. He was in dark jeans and a navy sweater, somehow more striking out of a suit. "There's been a mistake with the reservation," she said tightly. "Apparently I don't have a room." "That's impossible," he said. "I confirmed them myself yesterday." The receptionist's expression changed as recognition dawned. "Mr. Hayes, I assure you we assigned every room your office requested. Perhaps there was a miscommunication. Or sabotage," Rebecca thought, a cold suspicion forming. "Daniel still has friends in admin," she murmured under her breath. Understanding flashed in Jackson's eyes. He turned back to the desk. "What about my room?" he asked. "I believe I'm in the Lakeside Presidential Suite." "Yes, sir. 2 bedrooms, living area, Lakeview." The woman rattled off. "Perfect," he said. "Ms. Walsh and her daughter will be staying there. Please have their bags sent up." "Jackson, no." Rebecca waited until the receptionist walked away. "We can't share a suite. That's wildly inappropriate. It's a 2-bedroom with a living room bigger than my first apartment," he countered calmly. "Entirely appropriate. Unless you'd prefer to drive back to Brooklyn tonight." Penny, quiet until now, piped up. "Are we having a sleepover with Mr. Magic Man?" Jackson's serious expression eased into a smile as he crouched. "Hello, brave flower girl. I was hoping you'd be here to teach me new magic tricks." As Penny launched into an enthusiastic explanation of a card trick she'd seen online, Rebecca's gratitude warred with unease. Jackson had maneuvered her into an arrangement that would absolutely fuel gossip. What unsettled her more was how natural it felt. The 3 of them at the front desk, negotiating rooms and dinner, looked uncomfortably like a family. "It's settled then," Jackson said, standing and offering Penny his hand. "Let's find some food for this hungry magician." As they walked toward the restaurant, Rebecca had the distinct sensation of being watched. She glanced back and her breath caught. Across the lobby, a man stood with a suitcase at his feet, his gaze fixed on them. She recognized him instantly despite never seeing him in person before. Daniel Morgan. The look in his eyes promised that the weekend had just become far more dangerous. "Don't look now, but we have company," Rebecca murmured as they took a corner table in the lodge restaurant. She tilted her head slightly toward the entrance, where Daniel scanned the room with cold precision. "Let him look," Jackson said evenly, unfolding his napkin. "We're not doing anything wrong. Aren't we?" she thought, watching Penny chatter as Jackson helped her sound out menu words. Before she could push the point, a tall woman with elegant silver-streaked hair approached, smiling widely. "Jackson Hayes," she said, delighted. "I was beginning to think you planned to skip the mingling portion of these gatherings entirely." Then she turned that warm gaze on Rebecca. "You must be the new editorial director everyone's talking about. Rebecca Walsh." Rebecca nearly fumbled her menu. "Yes. And you're Ella Lenina Winters. Literary royalty. The woman whose blockbuster historical romances had made Meridian a powerhouse 15 years ago. 20 million copies sold worldwide. It's such an honor," Rebecca managed, offering her hand. "Your Bedford Chronicles series made me want to work in publishing. Ella Lenina, please." the author said, waving off formality. And who is this enchanting young lady? I'm Penny Walsh, Penny said proudly. And I know magic. Evelina laughed. What marvelous timing. I'm desperately in need of some magic for my new book. Might you be available for consultation, Miss Penny? Penny agreed at once, and Evelina glanced between Rebecca and Jackson with an astute, knowing look. You make a lovely family, she said. How refreshing to see Meridian executives who understand balance. Before Rebecca could correct the assumption, Evelina pulled out a chair and joined them, turning dinner into an impromptu strategy session. Other retreat attendees, and Daniel, kept their distance. Throughout the meal, Rebecca watched, half impressed, half disarmed, as Jackson slid seamlessly between discussing cover concepts with Evelina and cutting up chicken for Penny, listening to her stories as attentively as he did the author's concerns. Your daughter is absolutely charming, Evelina said over dessert. And clearly devoted to your husband, if I may say. Rebecca coughed on her water. Oh, Jackson isn't. We're colleagues, Jackson interjected smoothly, meeting Rebecca's eyes with a silent plea. Lucky colleagues. I'm fortunate to know both these remarkable Walsh women. Evelina's expression turned faintly skeptical, but she let it go, pivoting to a discussion of her contract. By the end of the evening, she'd invited Rebecca, not Jackson, to a private breakfast the next morning to talk about significant changes in her publishing plans. A meeting that should, by all logic, have been reserved for the CEO. That was quite a victory, Jackson observed later as they walked Penny back to